todo mundo.
So we start the afternoon session with the doping issues, the FIFA 11 to prevent doping. And as a first, I would like to ask Dr. Vaso. He is the FIFA Chief Anti-Doping Officer. Martin Vaso is a lawyer, and after 5 years of practice as a lawyer, he completed also a medical study, so he is Doctor of Medicine and Doctor of Law and lawyer in Switzerland, so he has the best qualification to lead the anti-doping unit of FIFA. He's since 1 year, and he was also in charge of the World Cup 2014. So Martin, give us your view.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, in the following presentation, I would like to show you two important areas of anti-doping. One concerns statistics, and the other one concerns legal, namely the implementation of the new anti-doping code 2015 and the most common mistakes seen since. Starting with an overview of the statistics from the years 2010 to 2013, an overall of almost 115,000 tests were undertaken. Out of these tests, only 387 cases were found to be positive cases. This is equivalent to 0.34%, which is a great value. It is a great figure, but does it mean that testing in football is effective? To answer this question, we can compare football with other sports based on the adverse analytical findings published in the official testing figures of WADA, showing the percentage of adverse analytical findings per sport. In football, it takes 200 tests to find one positive test result. In sports as skiing or tennis, it takes 250 up to 330 tests to find one positive test result. This means we test effective in football. Of course, there are always ways to improve, and we are willing to improve always. But we must state here that football is definitely a clean sport compared to other sports. The new WADA rule, regulated in the International Standard for Investigations and Testings, is quality for testing and not anymore quantity. Smart testing is the way to go from now on. Taking a closer look at the statistics, we can see that the most used substances were cannabinoids, followed by stimulants of the group S6, such as cocaine or methylhexanamine, and the third place goes to the anabolics. This value must be put in the right perspective, however. In 2013, only 11 cases out of 30,000 tests were positive for anabolics. Only 11. In the years, it's a small statistic, but I hope you can see it. In the years 25 to 2013, we can see following interesting facts. The yearly number of tests varies on average from 25,000 to 30,000 tests. These are large numbers, and you must know, out of all sports worldwide, 10% of doping tests are undertaken in football. As you can see in the statistics, cannabinoids were usually the biggest group of positive findings, but as you can see, it changed in 2013. The numbers of positive doping tests decreased significantly, and the main reason for this development might be the increase of the thresholds by WADA, meaning a higher amount of cannabinoid products must be found in the laboratory to confirm a test as positive. As a result of this change, the percent values of the other substances increased accordingly. This is simple mathematics. If one value of 3 decreases, the other 2 must increase if you measure in percentage. It has nothing to do with the trend reversal within the other substances. The same development shows when we look at the statistics in graphs. We can see a clear decrease in the amount of positive doping cases in the year 2013. The simple explanation for this trend we can discover in taking a look at the cannabinoids in the year 2013 compared to 2012. You see a steep decrease from 40 cases to only 10 cases. Again, this is based on the increasing of the thresholds by WADA. That's a good example of how changes in the prohibited list or the thresholds can have a big impact on statistics. Overall, we can state that football is the sport with the most doping tests each year, and football is a clean sport. And I want to thank all the member associations here, because it's only possible with your effort that we can do so many tests each year. Now on to the new anti-doping regulations 2015. As you know, WADA implemented the new code per 1st January 2015, and FIFA, as a signatory of WADA, naturally adapted its regulations. As a result, all member associations are therefore subsequently obliged to adapt their national anti-doping regulations accordingly. Now, with 5 months of experience since the implementation of the new code, I would like to show you the most common mistakes seen in decisions so far. They are not based on highly complicated deliberations, really not. They are usually concerning basic reasons, which are either based on not adapting the new regulations or just avoiding to read the new regulations. To obtain a normal decision, you only have to take a look on 4 articles. Articles 19 to 23 of the FIFA anti-doping regulation. Read it a couple of times if it's not clear, but read it. The new basic sentence must be 4 years and not 2 years. That's very simple. But there are still decisions coming through with a basic sentence of 2 years. Moreover, you need to discuss the intention of the player in your decisions. Depending on the outcome, the penalty can be 4 or 2 years. If there are reasons for the reduction of a sentence, they must be based on the terms negligence or fault. These are the main terms. There were decisions discussing if the player's performance was enhanced by prohibited substances or not, but neither fault nor negligence were mentioned once. And last but not least, if a player has tested positive for a specified substance, but you come to the conclusion that there was no significant fault or negligence, the minimum penalty has to be a reprimand and not no charge at all. This is, by the way, the same as in the last code. So here didn't change anything. This was a short overview of the topic statistics and new anti-doping regulations. I hope it was interesting, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Martin. So now we will ask our long-standing and long-term collaborator and our teacher in the laboratory background, Dr. Martial Soshi. He became professor at the University of Lausanne now 2 years ago. Martial?
Thank you, Jerzy. So my presentation will be a bit technical, so I begin with some acknowledgement. I want to thank really both Professor Dvorak and Michel Dog for this endless support of the activity of our laboratory. We made a successful project together, and I think that was really for the improvement of the fight against doping. I will speak a little bit about the biological passport, and I must thank also another person who is speaking right after me, because he was the first one at WADA to speak together with me in 2006 about the implementation of a biological passport. And he is not a scientist, he's the Director General of WADA, he's a lawyer. But this proves that lawyers can understand science, and so I thank also Mr. David Holman, who is coming after me. And the other thing regarding the philosophy, of course, we are technicians, I hope not technocrats, but behind our work in the laboratories, there is some philosophy. And I heard this morning both Michel and Nirji, and also Massimo and Mario speaking about respect, responsibilities, fair play, health, and all these terms are included in what the code, the anti-doping code, is speaking about the spirit of sport. In fact, we are dealing in the laboratory to fight against doping because we want to protect the clean athletes and we want to protect the spirit of sport. And I think this is something which is well known in football, and I like it for that. Now, to come to more basic things and technical things, to explain how the biological profile is working. In fact, the biological profile is based on within individual variation of biological markers of doping. Of course, we know that if it is based on a population, it's always difficult to be applicable to individuals in medicine, in biology in general. And it's why the basis of the biological profile is really to detect the changes in concentration of any of the markers. And if these changes are, let's say, not consistent with the normal physiology, with some tolerance, of course, we can say that it is going outside the limits. So really, the main principle of a passport is to work on individual limits. It's to work on a longitudinal follow-up. So with time, we are following the evolution of the biological parameters. I will show you what we say by adapted model. It means more you have data, more intelligent, I would say, is the profile. And of course, the main use of a biological profile or passport today is certainly to target for intelligence testing. This is not only for prosecuting, it is possible, but it is certainly to have intelligent testing. We have two modules which are in place now. Of course, we are working on the evolution of other modules, endocrine module, for example. But today, the hematological module is in place. It's really for checking for blood doping, I would say, to summarize EPO and blood transfusion. And we have the steroid module, which is really to check for steroid doping. Testosterone, of course, we are thinking to testosterone because it is not so easy to detect, and other steroids. Now, as already said by Professor Dvorak, we implemented the biological passport, biological profile already during the World Cup in Brazil. And you can see in this map the out of competition samples were taken in all these colored countries, so in Europe, mainly in Europe and in Americas. And of course, the in-competition samples were taken in the venue in Brazil. And just to give some input regarding the hematological module, I will speak about the passport or profile with the steroids. But give you an idea of what kind of data we got from all these anti-doping samples taken during the preparation and during the World Cup. For example, for the blood parameters, you can see that the competition, because you can see in black, this is in competition, and in white is out of competition. And you can see that, in fact, by applying, let's say, partially the guidelines for the blood test, we don't have any significant difference between the parameters obtained in and out of competition. And this is, I would say, remarkable, because it means that for football and for team sports, we have to rethink a little bit the pre-analytics to be applied for the blood test for the passport. And you see that on a population level, no deviation on the hemoglobin count and measurement, and on the reticulocytes, which are the main part of the hematological module of a passport. In that case, no difference between the population out of competition and population in competition. So this is a very important result in that case, and I think this is very good for the future to know that these in-competition samples, which are also important, taken after a football game, can be implemented in a profile. Now, speaking about the testosterone, of course, we are speaking, when speaking about the steroid module, we're speaking mainly on testosterone or testosterone precursors doping, because we still know that this is difficult to be detected on the differentiation between endogenous testosterone and synthetic testosterone taken by a pill or a patch or injection. In that case, this is just to show you what happened. You know that the T ratio, so the ratio between testosterone concentration and epitestosterone, which is to standardize, like creatinine, for example, to standardize the results we have in the urine. In that case, T ratio is still a diagnostic tool for testosterone doping. If you take testosterone like we show here, and you have a T ratio which is about the same concentration for both compound, take testosterone, oral testosterone, for example, will lead your T ratio to something between 20 and 40. And then look to the time. The decrease of the T ratio and the return to the normal will be done in between 6 and 8 hours. And of course, you don't see that 24 hours, you are back to the normal ratio in that case. What now we saw during the World Cup, you can see the results of the T ratio and how the concentration, the normal concentration of the players is spread between 0.5 or 0.1 for some Asian people to 4, even more than 4. So this natural level of T ratio are spread out in the population. It's why we have to follow individually the evolution of the T ratio. Now, how does it work really for the profile and the evaluation of the individual profile? You see here the 2 red points are the limits calculated on the basis of a population. So you see that 99.9% of the population has a T ratio lower than 9.2, and the same for the lower values. Now you take the first sample, a young guy. You have its value at 1.2. This 1.2 will indicate that for the next test, the limits will be a little bit thinner. It means it's becoming individual. It's why we are speaking about this adaptive model. It is, with time, adapted to your physiology, to your measurements. So you do another one, and it's giving you another limit, thinner and thinner. And of course, now, after 3 or 4 tests, suddenly you have something going out of the limits. And we can say in that case that at least we have to find explanation. It can be doping, can be suddenly endocrine disease or abnormality. And of course, we can continue. In this case, for sure, we'll ask the ADO to make investigation on the player. So this is really how it works with the passport. So at the FIFA World Cup 2014, we had many of these passports. You can see 2 examples. In that case, these 2 examples with T ratio, but also metabolite is quite significant, and you can see in that case that they are completely inside the limits. And to conclude, what are the advantages to introduce the biological profile? I see, of course, as already said, very good for intelligent and efficient testing to our point of view. It is, of course, very important then to make targeting. When you have some abnormalities, you have to target on a player, on an athlete. But it's also important to let quiet the people who are absolutely not abnormal, have a normal level. And you have, with the longitudinal approach, a larger window of detection than a single test, of course. And what we see in other sports also, it has a very important deterrent effect against doping. Thank you.
David Homan.
Dear colleagues, it is first of all my task to thank Marcel Sougy for his continuous collaboration and important technical help that we receive. You have no idea what the laboratory of Lausanne has done as miracles. For instance, in the last World Cup in Brazil, because all the samples had to be brought to his laboratory, and in the shortest time we always received the results. It is really a fantastic help for us. Thank you very much, Marcel, for that. And now it is my pleasure and a great honor to introduce David Homan. You all know David Homan. David Homan is the General Director of WADA, and it has always been a pleasure to collaborate in our common ambition to reach a world of sport without doping. I always said that we have 3 reasons to have a 0 tolerance towards doping. Primo, because it is against the ethics of sport. Secundo, because it is against the integrity of our competitions. And thirdly, and above all for us doctors, because it is against the health of our young athletes. And you have all seen the dramas occurring because of doping in young people. So David, thank you very much for your fantastic help to sport, and thank you for your collaboration with FIFA. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Michel. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today and to have the opportunity of addressing a very august audience, one which has assembled from all parts of the world and reminds me very much of how important medical issues are to all of our athletes. So I have a very privileged part to play with a small component of that medical part, and that is the anti-doping part. WADA's major role is to protect the rights of the clean athlete so that all those clean athletes can have full confidence in the global anti-doping system. And you've heard already this afternoon the numbers of athletes that are tested in football who have tested clean. By far, they outnumber those who are cheating, and we must respect the rights of those clean athletes. Turning then to the collaboration that we at WADA have with FIFA, I think it's very important for you to all know that Mr. Blatter is a member of the WADA Foundation Board. It's very important for you to know that Dr. Michel Doug has had a long relationship with us of a very friendly nature, one where we have had considerable opportunities to exchange views and to promote the way in which we work together in fighting doping in sport. It's important to say to you today that the FIFA anti-doping rules, outlined a little bit by Martin earlier, are fully compliant with the revisions that we made to the code and started in 2015. And finally, in terms of personal collaboration, our good friend Jiří Dvořák has been a member of our Health, Medical and Research Committee now for a number of years, and we are very grateful not only to his expertise at that committee level, but the way in which he has advanced anti-doping through his medical connections, in particular the British Medical Journal. If you look at the activities that we have conducted together with FIFA, here is a list of some of them. The first is a significant one, and we became aware of food contamination when there was a FIFA event held in Mexico a few years ago. And we discovered that some of the cattle that were being raised in that country were being fed clenbuterol to essentially fatten them up for market. That cattle was part of a problem that we encountered together at that World Championship, and we entered into a research project to see what we could do about it. That research project is still going. We need the assistance and the cooperation of the government of Mexico. We need the assistance and cooperation of the beef industry in Mexico. But most of all, we need the cooperation of the police, because there are parts of that country which are a little bit more difficult to police than others. Our objective here is to reach a situation where a sample can be analysed and found that clenbuterol was part of it, but that clenbuterol is part of a food contamination rather than oral ingestion of clenbuterol itself. So we're working together on that. We work together on a project that we have called Atoms, which is a software ability, free to all, where all the results from the laboratories go back to FIFA and come to us. And we monitor the results, we look at the profiles, and we work together in terms of how that information can be appropriately shared in order to give lie to the way, which has been outlined already, of conducting intelligent and efficient testing programs. We have our good friend Marcel Sorgi here today as a good example of one of the accredited laboratories in the world and how we need to work together with the laboratories, which we do. And I have to add my congratulations to Marcel for the way in which the samples from the World Cup in 2014 were analysed appropriately in Lausanne. We were the body that took the accreditation away from the laboratory in Rio. We took it away because there were a number of false positive cases over a period of months, which showed that the level of quality required from that laboratory was not up to speed. We did that in a proper way, and that was accepted by FIFA. We had to then work out a plan B, which was conducted very well with the samples going to Lausanne. We work together also on result management, and there have been a number of cases which have gone to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, where WADA and FIFA work alongside to make sure we do not duplicate costs and we do not duplicate energy. And finally on this list, FIFA ran a very successful Say No to Doping campaign in the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. When we conducted a review of our code in 2012 and 2013, FIFA led the submissions that were made to us on behalf of all team sports. That may not be known to many of you, but FIFA ran a number of meetings where all the international federations, all the international team federations were pulled together in Zurich so that the submissions relating to team sports could be made in a consistent fashion. That was not only helpful to team sports, it was extremely helpful to us, and we were grateful for that coordination. We work together when it comes to Olympic Games because there is a lot of pre-games testing run in Olympic Games times. And the IOC asks WADA to ensure that all the national anti-doping agencies in the world conduct appropriate programs in order to ensure the athletes who go to the Olympic Games are clean. We work together on independent observer missions, and we most importantly have worked together with FIFA on a recent initiative where we are pulling together the national anti-doping agencies and the international federations to see that they can work together. The national anti-doping agencies are in general funded by governments, and of course football is a private enterprise. So it's always a bit of a mix for us to bring together governments and sport, but that's the background of WADA. We are 50% sport and 50% government. And of course we have other opportunities, and Yuji has mentioned education today. We are working together with FIFA to ensure your programs are run in a very co-compliant and deterrent fashion. And I think prevention, as you have mentioned several times today, Yuji, is a real key of the way we go forward together. As I've said already, we want to make sure the voice of the clean athlete is heard loud and clear in all that we do. Marcel has given you a very good exposition of the athlete biological passport. I'm not going to say any more to the way in which he presented it. It was very clear to me, even as a lawyer. But I do want to say that a number of international federations have implemented this program now. We are responsible for ensuring we work with all the international federations to refine and enhance it. And despite a program that was aired on French television the other week, it is working. The program was wrong. The profiles they used were inaccurate. And we must make sure that those sorts of programs do not air and make sure that the public at large have full confidence in the way the passport goes further. Finally, I just wanted to say a couple of words on the World Cup in 2014, because we did work together in relation to the program that FIFA put into place for the World Cup. And what you have heard already is exactly what occurred. This was the first team sport program where every athlete who attended the World Cup was tested. Everyone was tested for the purpose of the profile that was then fed into the laboratory in Lausanne to create the passports for the players, as we've heard from Martial. That is significant, very significant for FIFA and very significant for WADA. And I thought that to end, rather than tell you what I felt at the time, it was better for you to hear from me, because as a lawyer, I know contemporaneous evidence is far more important than in hindsight. And so what I just wanted to show you was the video that we sent to FIFA following the event, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Can you run the video, please?
WADA commends FIFA on the very extensive doping control program it has run at the World Cup, both in the pre-event testing and in competition testing during the event in Brazil. Not only has it collected samples in competition, as would normally be the case at such an event, it has ensured that every player at the tournament has contributed a blood sample which has formed a profile for FIFA and all the football community to extend in future testing. The Blood Passport Project and the assistant steroid module is a significant advance in the way in which we are addressing doping in sport. It has been legally tested at the Court of Arbitration for Sport and is scientifically proven as an advantage in the way in which we conduct doping control tests. So hats off to FIFA for what they have done for the first time by an international federation at such an event in collecting such samples and creating the profiles. We now look forward to the confederations and the national federations adding to these profiles so that it will allow the football community to see that the clean athletes among the players can hold their hands up and say, I have a clean profile, I am a clean athlete. Thanks to FIFA, we look forward to the rest of the World Cup and trust it all goes well.
Thank you Very much, David, for this message. It meant a lot to us during the World Cup, and it terminated the speculation of media saying that we are not doing that right. You just simply, based upon facts, acknowledged our work, and we really appreciate that. It's sometimes very important at that moment that we can concentrate on the work. So now I give the word to Dr. Michel Dog to address you from the sports political position, him as an executive committee member of FIFA, what you need to take care for. Michel?
Thank you, Jiří, and believe me, I will be very short, but I ask your particular attention because it is important. As Jiří said, in my double capacity of member of FIFA's ExCo and chairman of the Medical Commission, I ask you, I pray you, to study intensively the WADA anti-doping code of 2015. That is legally binding, as FIFA has been declared compliant, as David Homan just said. Make sure that the regulations in your own country, following the example of FIFA, are in perfect accordance with the WADA code. If this is not the case, if you do not follow the code, you take a serious risk of an appeal on level of the CAS, resulting many times in high costs and important sanctions. So please follow the example of FIFA. Please study intensively the WADA code. It is important for all your national associations and certainly also for the medical responsibles. Thank you.
Thank you, Michel, for this very important statement. Keep it in mind, because that will make our work, particularly of Martin Vaso, in the medical office and anti-doping unit much easier. So we come to the next presentation, and for the first time we will share with you the idea to create the FIFA 11 rules to prevent doping. Can you put the slides of the 11? To prevent doping in football. You have seen in the introduction this video when we tested the Brazilian team, and it was for us a very important experience. You know, coming to the Brazilian team, I think we arrived to the hotel 6:30, and all the players were extremely kind to us. They were collaborative, and I was very impressed that there was no complaints whatsoever, except from Neymar. He just made a joke and said, "Doctor, next time you tell me in advance so I can set up my alarm clock." But of course, you know, that was just a joke. But there were also statements which you have seen in the video when a prominent player, after taking blood and urine, he understands why we do it for the clean sport, and they say, "Thank you very much, doctor," or "Thank you, my friend." So when we come to the 11 rules to prevent doping, they are very simple 11 messages, and we will think very carefully to ask 11 world prominent football players, in analogy to the other programs, to support it. And you can be sure that we will find there the very prominent one, and I'm sure that they will all collaborate. We will collaborate in this respect with WADA, because it is important, the same as we had the action say no to doping during the 2010 World Cup. And we will ask the players to become the spokesman, because when footballer speaks, everybody listens. So I go very quickly. We will publish it in the journals. We will publish it on the webpage. So doping is cheating, message 1. Get very well informed, as the chairman has mentioned. Check the prohibited list. It's very clear. All the medication which is prohibited is on the list, so learn it. You as doctors are responsible. Message 4. Focus on good nutrition. Balanced diet is very important. Supplements, according the consensus meeting on nutrition in football, do not add anything to improve the performance. It's the myth. So rather leave it away. Supplements really are not necessary. Healthy diet, good diet, and you will have fit players. Message 6, do not risk your career. Avoid social drugs. Keep in mind that marijuana can stay in the body up to 40 days. You smoke marijuana, not you, but the players smoke marijuana, it stays in your body up to 40 days. So they have to know it. Anabolic steroids are very harmful. Very clear message. Message 9, don't forget your whereabouts. We arranged with WADA, and this is unique. We go by teams. We ask the teams, and you as the doctors can help us a lot. Where is the team? Because the teams, they are always together if they train, if they go to matches. So we want to know where they are. And if somebody is missing in the team, then we want to know why they are missing in the teams. And never refuse a test or tamper with a sample. We have currently one situation where there is the tampering of sample, and this is extremely unpleasant for everybody. Once you take the samples, you let it go. And if you make a mistake, you rather admit it at the beginning of the chain of custody and not to try to tamper it later on. This is the biggest mistake you can do. And message 11 was addressed: if a player has to take a medication, then ask for the therapeutical use exemption. We have experience, we have approved or declined the approval according to the medical evidence and medical reports. We do not receive many, but be aware of that this has to be prepared in a very good and way that we can understand. 11 simple messages, we will go through that. Now, I use the opportunity today to say that we are starting a new system. We have learned quality over quantity. During the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, we have introduced routinely the testing for xenon. That was for the first time that International Federation, without making too much noise about that, we have tested particularly the teams participating in the World Cup who could be tempted to use xenon. We tested them, all of them, and they were all negative. So that was the past. Now today, actually yesterday, we made the first testing, unannounced testing, on teams participating in the Women's World Cup 2015 in Canada for gene doping, genetic doping. We have the possibility to analyze the small interfering ribonucleic acid, which is on the WADA prohibited list, and we performed already the first tests in the laboratory in Cologne. This is a new, David, I use the opportunity because you are here to make it public. We are not testing all the players like we did in the World Cup in Brazil. We are testing selected teams, and we go on the quality, including new, for the first time. Nobody did it before us, the genetic testing in the fight against doping. Because this siRNA, the misuse will increase the muscle mass and strength by the inhibition of myostatin. So quality over quantity. So with this announcement, also for the presented press, I will conclude this presentation. Thank you very much. So I ask David, Martin, and Martial to come on the stage, and we have time for a short discussion. Question from the audience?
Well done.
Yes?
Merci. C'est
Thank you, Dr. Zalika Tubiano, Vice President of the Medical Commission of the Guinea Football Federation. I listened very closely to the various presentations, and I would like to congratulate the different speakers for the high quality of their presentation. You spoke about a number of tests that were implemented in 2010, 2014, 20,000 tests, and 380 tests were positive, so a 0.04 percentage rate. Well, that's a very low percentage rate. But I would like to know whether amongst these 380 positive tests we could know the breakdown according to male and female, because we know that there is a difference there. And second question, is there a way to find out whether what the motivation was behind the doping that those positively tested athletes provided?
Positive cases. Do you know how many boys, how many girls?
I would have to double check that. I can't say this just here. I can come back to you later and tell you the exact number.
And then the second question is, are there studies about the motivation why these people took doping products?
This is a very good point, I think, and I think I'm not aware of such studies, but I think this is a good point, and I think we should have a deeper look in this regard.
I will add to this question. At the period, actually, since we have really a very good documentation thanks to WADA, because all laboratories are reporting, in the last 5-6 years, there was not a single case of prominent professional football players. Most of those positive findings are in the second, third league, but really the prominent professional football players, we haven't found any single positive case.
And also the majority of the positive cases concern what we call the social products that are classically used in many countries.
More questions? Yes, in the back. Sudan.
It's very active.
I just have a question regarding camping in high altitude. We know that physiologically is going to increase the diphosphoglycerate and to shift the oxygen dissociation curve, as well as induce a rise in the erythropoietin. That's just simple camping in high altitude. Is that, could that be considered as blood doping? Thank you.
Martial? Short answer.
It's not blood doping. And the interpretation and the algorithm which is used in the biological passport for the hematological module is taking into account, based on the whereabouts, taking into account the high altitude training camps. So it means that the limits, individual limits, will certainly increase. But we know that altitude training is not bringing improvement in such a way that you can, let's say, not make the difference with EPO doping or with blood transfusion doping. There are many experiences on that and papers.
Other questions?
More comments? Yes?
Tengo una pregunta.
I have a question for David Howen. You mentioned about contamination by clenbuterol in meat in Mexico. In 2011 we've had studies about this, but there was no conclusive result or conclusion, really. My question now is those who are responsible for doping control in Mexico, and those who are in charge of testing during the America Cup in Mexico, we have seen that there are quite a few adverse findings in this, and we wonder whether this is also down to the clenbuterol infection or the clenbuterol contamination of meat.
Contamination in Mexico. He is responsible for the doping controls in South America. He has a lot of problems with adverse analytical findings concerning that. Could you, and you did not yet reach a conclusion, could you say what is the position actually?
Of course, we have a lot of cases we know about clenbuterol in Mexico especially. We have there also rules, so the laboratory can give you the advice if a test was mainly based on meat contamination or not. This you can see on the level you see in the laboratory result. So if you have a positive finding with clenbuterol, you must check the level which they measured, and according this level you can make a decision, was it by meat contamination or was it by purpose or by intention? And of course, if it was by meat contamination, then it's not the athlete's fault. And we have also, in the new anti-doping code, as a new paragraph, a new article who's mentioning especially contaminated products. So you can also go with this. But usually when it's meat contamination, the athlete shouldn't face a sentence.
David, can you add?
Well, I think that's a very sensible, practical answer that Martin has given in relation to a positive case at the present. What we are working on is trying to alleviate even those positive cases so that you don't have them. And we need to work further, both with FIFA but also with the Mexican government, on what is actually going on with the cattle so that we can analyse clenbuterol as coming from cattle as opposed to coming from oral ingestion. So we need to work further. We think maybe another 12 months of this research project before we reach a conclusion in relation to that.
So Osvaldo, very pragmatic answer. Each case has to be dealt individually. And if you are in doubts, then you decide in dubio pro reo.
Are there other questions?
Yes.
Madam from Barbados.
Question, Bahamas.
Bahamas.
Yes. My question is a comment on questions. Both FIFA and WADA caution athletes about nutritional supplementation, obviously due to the issue of strict liability. However, we know that the vast majority of athletes take nutritional supplements. In many cases, for young female athletes, for example, because of the risk, or they have iron deficiency anemia, or in regions like the Bahamas where sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease is high. Is FIFA doing any research, or would be interested really in partnering either with the Bahamas Football Association or CONCACAF, looking at actual nutritional deficiencies in these young athletes so it could be more targeted supplementation? Because as we're targeting dope testing, we want to make sure that nutritional supplementation is targeted, because that's a very common problem. So just your feedback on that, please.
I would advise you to address the US Food and Drug Administration in first stage to make sure that these supplements are not contaminated by prohibited substances. Clear statement. The pressure has to come from the sport. The industry will not put the pressure, because this is the problem. Otherwise, you could do whatever, but we are warning the athletes to take them because we know the supplements are contaminated.
But what is interesting in your question is that you ask us to study more efficiently the deficiencies in some athletes, especially in women. I think this is an excellent suggestion, and I think a lot can be done in the future for that. Thank you for that. Other questions? Before we leave the pharmacological scene, we have, of course, to take very well care about our anti-doping policy, but there is another big problem. And that is that we see more and more in all our national and international competitions the use and particularly the abuse of analgesics and anti-inflammatory drugs. The reason is simple. Players have to play more and more. They have a little pain here, they have a little pain there, but they have to perform. So they take the classical products that you all know. And on long term, you know as well as me that this has devastating effects on the gastrointestinal, on the urogenital, and even on the cardiorespiratory system. We see on level of world championships that in some groups of 23 players, and we have the statistics of the 72 last hours before the game, that nearly all players take such medication. We see that some players even take 3 different ones, and what is preoccupating, especially Professor Dvorak and myself, is that we see it more and more on youth level. So I think this asks a specific care from all our doctors here. Please take care that young people do not come to abuse of these medications.
Thank you. So thank you for participating in this session. Please, the next video to introduce the next session. Well, it is a great pleasure to introduce the next session, my favorite one, the exercise football pill. It's a collaboration now almost of 10 years with the group which we have learned about them from the scientific literature. And the more we talk to each other, the more we design new studies. So I would like to welcome both Peter Krustrup and Jens Bangsbo from the University of Copenhagen, who are working more or less on the backbone or the scientific evidence to promote the program 11 for Health.
Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure and a privilege for us to be here today to present the comprehensive and convincing results from our research studies showing the benefits of playing football across the lifespan for males and females.
We would also like to thank FIFA for their fantastic support to all these studies we have conducted in the past years, and like we just heard, the collaboration is just developing from day to day, and we're really happy about that collaboration.
In Copenhagen, Denmark, we have studied the fitness and health effects of football for more than 12 years now. In 2003, we started up with low-level senior and veteran players and moved on to completely untrained and unexperienced football players, and also socially deprived and homeless men. With very promising pilot results, we moved on to a long series of randomized controlled trials on the preventive effects of football for untrained men and women, for elderly, and for school children. And since 2010, we have conducted many randomized controlled trials on patient groups with hypertension, with type 2 diabetes, and also prostate cancer. This comprehensive work also involves comprehensive methodologies investigating the movement pattern and the physiological demands of recreational football, including video analysis, blood samples, GPS measurements, and also heart rate measurements. And the broad spectrum fitness and health effects are examined by numerous investigations related to the cardiovascular fitness, the metabolic fitness, and the musculoskeletal fitness. And in most of our studies, we compare the effects of football with other types of physical activity, running, swimming, gymnastics, and strength training, in order to understand the mechanisms behind the training adaptations. In our pilot studies, we also investigated young men and women with an elevated risk of lifestyle diseases related to low maximal oxygen uptake, high fat percentage, high blood pressure, and poor postural balance. And actually, after just 12 weeks of football training, 2 times 1 hour per week, we found out that many of these players had no longer an elevated risk of lifestyle diseases. Just as one example, we see that 3/4 of the players starting off with hypertension were no longer hypertensive after just 12 weeks of training. Very encouraging pilot results. And this led us to move on to the first randomized controlled trial in 2006, comparing 4 very popular types of physical activity: jogging, interval running, football, and strength training. The football conducted 2 to 3 times per week for 12 weeks, with the same average heart rate for the football training and the jogging. 82% of individual maximal heart rate. And again, a very comprehensive testing procedure with 6 test days before the experiment, 6 testing days after 4 weeks of training, and another 6 testing days after 12 weeks of training. And here we got the highlights of the results, showing that football is as effective in increasing maximal oxygen uptake as high-intensity interval training. Jogging has a moderate effect, strength training, no positive effect on aerobic fitness. We also observed that football is indeed a very good means of providing a fat loss. In addition to that, football training for this particular participant group was as effective as strength training in improving and increasing lean body mass as well as bone mass. So altogether, football training is actually an effective combination of 3 types of training: endurance training, high-intensity interval training, and strength training. And in addition to that, our sports psychologists described how hard the training was, the perceived exertion of the football training, which on a scale from 0 all the way to 10 was given a 4, a moderate exertion, even though the heart rate was really high and there were many intense actions, whereas the jogging was perceived harder and interval running even harder. Probably because the football players were focusing on the teammates, on the opponents, on the joyful elements of the game, rather than the physical strain. Since then, a lot of things has happened. The project has gradually expanded, and since late 2007, we have had a very close and a very fruitful collaboration with FMARC, with Jirgi Dvorak, with Astrid Junge, and Colin Fuller. And we have now published the first 68 scientific articles, and we are now working in a tremendously big group with 150 researchers from 14 countries. And some of the highlights from this collaboration is indeed the first supplements published in 2010 before the World Cup in Africa, describing the preventive effects of football. And the second one, published prior to the World Cup in Brazil, describing the prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation through football. And yes, we have indeed since then studied many different groups of participants: mature women, elderly men, school children, conducted various types of tests, also in the schools, sprint testing, echocardiography, VO2 max testing on a treadmill or on a bike, along with DEXA scans looking at the muscles, the bones, and the fat, muscle strength, and also coordination and cognitive function.
Peter, er you?
Ja.
Det er dig, der er på.
Det er dig, der. Okay. Testing all these different participants groups and looking at the mechanisms behind the adaptations, it is indeed so that we're interested in the aerobic component of football. How hard is the heart rate? Is it low? Is it moderate? Is it high? But also the anaerobic components and all the activities related to the stimuli to the muscles and the bones. And as Jens will now describe, we have looked into this for participants across the lifespan and also for different groups with different diseases. And along the way, it's about understanding the effects on the cardiovascular fitness, the metabolic fitness, and the musculoskeletal fitness, because that affects the risk of lifestyle diseases.
Thank you. So why is it then that efficient, apparently? And we had to get a bit closer into what is it actually we are dealing with. This is not 11 against 11, it's 5 against 5, 6 against 6. They're playing as they like. There are no referee, there are no coach, they just play the game. And what happens when you do that? Quite surprisingly, and here this is showing the heart rate, this is % of maximal heart rate. You have less than 70, 70 to 80, 80 to 90, 90 to 95, 95 to 100. Quite surprisingly, they are in the most of the time about 80% of the maximal heart rate. Despite it is a game like you know it. They are walking, they are standing, and they are running sometimes a bit further and faster. And this accounts for whatever type of small-sided games you are organizing, shown here, 1 against 1, 3 against 3, 7 against 7. You do see the major part of the time, they are about 80% of maximal heart rate. So it's quite simple. Just go out, play it, play against each other. You may go a bit closer into actually what are the activities. And as we do see for the elite players, they stand a lot. They are walking. You do see these are the number of activities of walking within a training session of lasting about an hour. 300 activities of walking and standing. This is not what causing these effects. What is causing it is the more intense actions, as you do see them here. There are quite a number of those, despite these are not used to play football. Because in many of the studies we have actually participants that haven't been playing football before or may not have been playing for 10, 20, 30 years. And you may go a bit closer into it and look at, for example, how many jumps do they have, how many passes do they have, and these are 1-hour sessions for women players. You do see a total of 119 activities. They have turns, they have tackles, and they do various types of activities, as we do know them from what we may call real football. Now we will highlight a few of the results, looking now also football as a treatment. In this study, we are dealing with 3 months training, twice a week, hypertensive men, as you will see here. They had a significant drop in systolic blood pressure. Here is in millimeter mercuries. We are up to about 13 millimeters mercury fall after 3 months of training. Of football training, we have a decrease about 8 millimeter mercury of the diastolic blood pressure. And we compare that to a doctor advisory group, where you do see changes, but not as marked as you do when you do football training. What does this mean? Yeah, you know better than I do. You are doctors, I'm not. 13 millimeters mercury decrease in systolic blood pressure for these people. Some say it's up to a 50% reduced risk of getting cardiovascular disease after 3 months of football. We also had a closer look at their hearts, and it represented what the doctor said, 10 years younger hearts just by playing for 3 weeks. Other factors were clear from that. You had the hypertension, the decrease in blood pressure was more marked for the group that played football, but we also had things in the football group we didn't experience in the doctor advisory group, decreased arterial stiffness, lowering of the resting heart rate, a significant increase actually in the maximum oxygen uptake. So a number of other effects that we didn't see in the other group. Type 2 diabetes, does it work? We know these patients have significant problems also with the cardiovascular system. Just highlight a few of the data here. First, we could see the fitness became better. You do see after 12 weeks. They had a significant increase in the maximum oxygen uptake. No really further increase in the following 12 weeks. They were playing 1.8 times a week. You don't see any change in the control group of diabetic patients that just live their normal life. Here you also see the effect on the blood pressure, a marked decrease in the first 12 weeks, and then it leveled off. Here, we're no change in the control group. A similar study done in Brazil, where there was both men and women. We did see a significant change in this, and the difference between this study and the other study was it was combined with a diet aiming at reducing the body mass. And you do see both the training group, football and diet, and the diet group had a significant loss of fat mass. But what you do see here, triglycerides were not changed in the diet group, whereas you had a significant decrease in the other group. And I must say, these are impressive, these data. Maybe you're not impressed, but we were. But the best thing was actually that these guys playing the football decided to continue playing after the game. This is now 1.5 years ago. They organized the training themselves. They are still playing together, have increased the frequency from 1 to 2 times a week now, after 1.5 years when they finished the study. So that may actually be the main result of this study, that we are able to maintain their interest in doing these things. Peter?
Thank you. As mentioned, we have also studied homeless men and the effects of street football, organized on street football pitches, 16 times 22 meters. And we have seen impressive results for this particular group, with marked increases in aerobic fitness, with marked decreases in LDL cholesterol, and also marked improvements in postural balance. So again, just like for the patient groups, multiple broad spectrum effects on the cardiovascular side, the metabolic side, and also the musculoskeletal side. And this is actually really important for this participant group, which are hospitalized 5 times more often than the general population due to sudden trauma. So if we can improve the postural balance and the muscle strength along with the bone strength of these participants, it is indeed possible to reduce the number of falls and fractures. We've also conducted multiple studies on women, and we see the same results as for the men. Large systematic increases in VO2 max of 15% after just 16 weeks of training. Marked improvements in cardiac structure and function. The function was improved after only 16 weeks of training, and the structure was changed after long-term football, 16 months of football training. And actually, we also saw marked improvements in bone mineralization for these women. So 14 weeks of training actually made their bones 2.5 to 5 years younger. A very impressive result. Along with that, we conducted a recent study on the Faroe Islands with hypertensive women, showing marked results on the blood pressure with decreases of 12/6 millimeters of mercury after 15 weeks of training, along with a very positive change in body composition, larger muscles, less fat. And recently, we also conducted studies with football at the workplace, because in addition to the multiple effects related to lifestyle diseases, we have actually also observed positive effects in relation to neck shoulder pain for hospital employees, including female nurses, with a lower duration of pain and a lower pain intensity of the neck shoulder after just 12 weeks of training. And that is actually really important in relation to perform optimally in your working task. And the company owners were really happy about this result, along with another result showing that small volume football, just 2 times 15 minutes per week, was actually effective in decreasing fat mass, along with improvements in aerobic fitness. So the company owner said, okay, we can play football at lunchtime twice a week. And that will decrease the neck shoulder pain, and it will also improve the general fitness of our employees. After these comprehensive studies on women, we developed a program, a concept for football training in Denmark, along with the Danish FA and the Danish Sports Confederation, called Football Fitness. It is football on small pitches, as Jens described, focusing on training rather than games, all the joyful and social elements. This was implemented in Denmark in 2011. Thousands of women are actually playing football like that in Denmark now. Women that have never entered a football club before. And recently, this concept, the football fitness concept, was introduced on the Faroe Islands. And after just 4 weeks, they have tripled the number of active females in their football clubs. And let me just show a video from the Faroe Islands. As you can see, organized on small pitches. This is just a small village with 55 football fitness players playing on 3 different pitches right next to each other. And yes, it is intense. They're losing the ball a lot, but they're regaining the ball quite fast. A lot of activities, and yes, it is actually snowing up there, but they are playing.
So, just a few more information before our general discussion. Football for school children. This is a study we have conducted recently with about 500 school children. And one thing that's obvious, and we all know that, the physical education lessons are not really that demanding. I think you have children or grandchildren that have experienced that the physical education is not very demanding. So we, in this case, compared football training. This is basketball, and this is floorball, it's called. And here you do see the heart rate during one of these lessons. And down here you have other type of activity they usually do. Or it may be even more clear if you go down here and look, and because here it's shown about 80% of maximal heart rate. How often does that occur in a lesson here if it's the normal type of activity? Very, very rarely. If you look here and talk about not the football you may have seen in the schools, playing 11 against 11, basketball 7 against 7, smaller groups, 3 against 3, suddenly you increase the heart rate, and that's what you do see. A significantly part, up to 40% of the time, they have a heart rate that is much, much higher than usual. Does it have an effect? Yes, apparently, because in this group, 2 times 30 minutes a week, because the lessons are maybe 45 minutes, but it's only 30 minutes of activity, because they have to change and so on. You actually, in 6 weeks, see a significant increase in their ability to do intermittent exercise, measured in this case as a yo-yo intermittent recovery test adapted for children. So they had a 25% increase in their performance after these 6 weeks, just by doing things a little bit different. In this case, it was football. Does it have an effect also physiological? Yes. And again, back to this study here, this is another study where we had 10 weeks, and in this case, they trained 3 times 40 minutes. But actually, we were able to see changes in the heart. This is the left ventricular posterior wall diameter. So basically, this is the size of the wall, and you do see a significant increase in 10 weeks. So it has an effect by doing these type of activities in such a rather short period with these 9 to 10 years old children. And another obvious measure and easy to collect is the resting heart rate. And you do see the group that did football training had a significant decrease, indicating a significant effect on the cardiovascular system, whereas there was a tendency to an increase in the other group. So apparently 10 weeks of this type of activity has a significant physiological effect. Coming to the other end, from the young to the elderly, we have conducted a number of studies, and the first result is a cross-sectional study. So what does this tell us? Think about that for a second. What does this figure tell us? If you are 70 and you have played football all your life, you have a muscle force development that is as good as a 30 years untrained person. Later on, you will see it's never too late to start. But anyway, it's much better than those that have not been playing. You do see this, and you see the same results here. Talking about balance, here you have the 17-year-old football players compared to 30-year-old untrained players in terms of balance. This is a control value. Does it mean anything? Balance, falls, fractures, you will say even money, because it costs. So why do we not get them going? And it helps because this study shows us actually that if you start training in a very late age, 65, 70, you can still get those improvements. This is shown in this figure, where we have the maximal oxygen uptake. You see a significant increase after 16 weeks in those guys that are between 65 and 75. Some of them have not been playing football before, some have not been playing for 50 years. Compared to a resistant training group, you don't see any significant changes, and this was the control group. And this one also indicates that there is a significant effect. We not only studied them for 16 weeks, we actually studied them for 12 months. And what do you see here? A significant increase in the bone mineralization, whereas, quite surprisingly, there was no change in the resistant training group. So also the bones will become stronger. So we are approaching an end, and Peter?
We've also conducted a recent study with FC Prostate, a very special football team. Elderly men with prostate cancer undergoing anti-androgen treatment to block their testosterone, to stop or to slow the development of the cancer. There are several side effects of this treatment, along with an increased blood pressure, an increase in fat mass, and also a decrease in muscle mass and functional capacity. So why not try to use football as a means to avoid the side effects? And actually we observed for this particular group with an average age of 66, a large increase in muscle mass after just 12 weeks of football, despite the lack of testosterone, along with a 15% systematic increase in muscle strength. And in addition to that, these gentlemen also had an increase in bone mineralization. So impressive results for this particular group. And we are now launching a program, nationwide program for prostate cancer patients, with recruitment of prostate cancer patients from the 6 biggest Danish hospitals to local football clubs. So, and recently there is a video broadcasted on the Chinese television describing all our results with elderly men.
Oxygen intake and muscularity. The team spirit and camaraderie of football also helped to ensure the players kept up their fitness regime.
We know for sure now that football has got a huge potential in preventing and treating lifestyle diseases. We know that in relation to hypertensive patients, we know that in relation to type 2 diabetics, and we also know that football can be an effective rehabilitation of prostate cancer patients.
Jens Nielsen is 74 years old, and until he took part in this study, he had never played football in his life.
I'm able to do many things I didn't do before. It means running, walking. My feelings are much better, and I feel, in fact, I feel younger, even if I am not.
Football is fantastic because you exercise, you sweat. It gives me a good feeling inside, a good atmosphere in my body. If I can give some good energy to my people around me, then that circle will continue like a water circle, you know?
Celebration.
Thank you.
And these gentlemen have actually played football for 3 years now. Exactly. So to conclude, it is indeed so that recreational football is easy to organize as an intense and variable and effective training, and also joyful. Across the lifespan for many different participant groups, including people that have never played football before. And it is so that the effects are broad spectred, related to cardiovascular health, related to metabolic health, and also to musculoskeletal health. And yes, football can be used in order to treat lifestyle diseases, non-communicable diseases, including hypertension and type 2 diabetes. And it is definitely of importance that football can also be used as a treatment against cancer. Over the last 7 years, there's been a lot of media attention around this. It has been broadcasted in more than 120 countries. In 2007, we actually had broadcasting on 45 American television stations, highlighting this slogan. There's a new slogan for Weight Watchers, "Burn it like Beckham." In 2010, the New York Times focused on the fact that soccer moms would have a great benefit of actually entering the pitch rather than standing outside the pitch. We had a huge media attention around the use of football to kick high blood pressure. And recently, the BBC World Health News highlighted the results in relation to the improvement of physical fitness and general well-being of Denmark's homeless.
Thank you, Peter. So, hopefully we have convinced you that football have something special to offer. It was highlighted also in this review written a few years ago, but also that physical activity in general, we know that, has this effect, but specifically that football is efficient. And from the 2014 supplement, we have that statement from Joseph Blatter and Zurich. It shows a great promise in changing the habit of untrained people all over the world, creating adherence to physical activity and healthier lifestyle. This has again been highlighted quite recently in another systematic review where it came out that only running and football really had shown to have that significant effect. And recently, we also tried to put some of these data together. So if you have a specific interest, you may have to look at this one. And if you just want to have a highlight of these things, have a look at this editorial, because it tells the story. Not only for you, but for the people around you. We have all that media attention. And what's happening? Very little, isn't it? Because people are not reflecting. Start with this editorial, go to your Minister of Health. He will understand, or she will understand. She will immediately support you, because it is, at the end of the day, also money we are talking about. I think GS could make the calculation and show, if you're just implementing a small part of this we have been talking about, we are really changing the health status of the population. So it's your duty now to take those data, bring them back, and make the proper discussion, and make the implementation. And we have some good ideas about how to do it. Peter?
We certainly do, because all these promising results have led to the development and the implementation, and also the evaluation of 6 important training concepts. You know FIFA 11 for Health very well. Colin Fuller, Astrid Junge, Jirti Dvorak will describe this fantastic concept later on today. And also the expansion of the project in Europe with Denmark as the pilot country. Indeed, it's very important for you to look at all the options for untrained adults in relation to the prevention and treatment of lifestyle diseases. Football fitness is a very strong concept, and I hope that it can be used in many member associations around the globe. It is so that football can be used as a treatment of prostate cancer, and probably also other types of cancer. And why not use the local football clubs and make a collaboration between the hospitals and the football community? So there's a great scope for this, there's a great potential, and I really hope that you are inspired by the results and also by the Football for Health concepts that we can actually spread out all over the world. To us, as scientists, recreational football is a beautiful game because it's joyful, it's social, and it's indeed healthy. Thank you very much.
Skifter du, Peter?
Well, thank you, Peter and Jens.
Skifter du lige en gang? Og den er væk. Ja.
You have something to say?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
We had a slide more. But,
Oh, you have one more slide?
no, that's fine. It's not that important at the moment.
No?
Yes.
Okay, so we will come to this later. Well,
Yes.
thank you very much. You will understand now why backbone for the 11 for Health. When I go around the world and speak with the governments, with the ministers very often, I am asked, why football? Why not other sport? Then my answer has 2 parts. First of all, because football is the most popular game. And second, because we have the evidence. We have the scientific evidence which entitled us to promote that. So it's not a political promotion, it's a promotion based upon the scientific facts and figures. And please use those facts and figures negotiating or speaking with your governments. And it happened even that we could convince a country around the world, New Zealand, where they think the most popular game is rugby. They are now introducing the program in New Zealand. So I think this is our duty to spread the message from Denmark all around the world. Thank you very much once again for this remarkable work. Questions, comments?
Yes, so there remains hope for all of us for the future.
Please start.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Poka from Uganda. I have 2 questions. Thank you for the impressive data that you have showed.
Excellent.
I just wondered, what is the threshold for these benefits? Is there, in terms of the frequency or the intensity of the game, for it to have those benefits? Question number 2, are there any side effects? Do you have any data on the injuries that may be associated with this kind of football? Thank you.
I can start up with the first question. It is indeed so that there are positive effects even with small volume interventions, as we described with 2 times 15 minutes or 5 times 12 minutes. But the optimal effects are achieved when you train for 2 times 1 hour per week. And we have conducted long-term studies following the same participants for 2 years with marked additional effects with long-term training, especially on the heart structure and function and on the bone mineralization. So there's certainly a scope for continuing the exercise. And it's even so that if you start up and have large improvements in the first 3 months of training, as a 40-year-old woman, a 40-year-old man, or a 70-year-old man, with 2 to 3 times 45 or 60 minutes per week, you can actually maintain these improvements by a lower frequency. In one study conducted in 2010, Randers et al., we showed that just 1.3 times per week for an additional year was enough to maintain the positive improvements in VO2 max, in body composition, and that the training had additional effects on bone mineralization, even with a low frequency.
Yeah, and that's clear from most of the studies. The diabetic study, we had the opportunity to follow them as they continued playing, and we could see, even though it reduced the training, they maintained all the benefits they had in the first period. So that applies to also patient groups as such. Coming to the second question about injuries, this is definitely a thing you need to consider. We can't just increase the number of injuries, and therefore the preparation for it is important. We may not have done enough in terms of that during a prevention program. They had a proper warming up program, but I think we should optimize that in the future in collaboration with Mario and his colleagues. But the number of injuries was actually very low. We were quite surprised about that. It was, normally training is giving much less injury compared to games, but in comparison to the normal injury rates, we were down to 1/3 of what you see in training. We do only have few numbers. We haven't done a proper study because we're talking about 500 players. You may need 10,000 to make this proper study. But we had very few injuries and not more than we had in a running group. And that may be because the football is very different from the thing we are considering now. You saw the ladies from the Faroe Islands. It's not the football we see when we play 11 against 11, recreational football. Bam, a clash, and come on. It is very different, also because they have no previous football experience, so they really don't know that it's possible actually to do gliding tackles and so on. They don't know that, so the football is very different. And that may be why we have so few injuries and no one that actually kept them out of the study. So it is not a big concern, but it needs to be studied more carefully. I think we need to make even better prevention programs as part of the warming up.
Okay. Yeah, hi. Raymond Ford, Barbados again. My main question has been answered as to what would be the main selling point in stating that football is more beneficial than any other participation in any other sport. I mean, you've stolen my thunder, but just to let you know that the International Tennis Federation, about 4 years ago in launching their Play and Stay campaign for juniors, and more recently Tennis Express, have already published in their brochures data stating that tennis, again, decreases cardiovascular risk, decreases hypertension, decreases diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. I just wonder if we were also playing a catch-up game. I know that, obviously the increase in participation worldwide with increased sales of football materials, et cetera, et cetera. But, as I said, the main thing is that I am aware that football is the more popular sport worldwide, but other sports have done similarly as well.
It is indeed so that there are multiple positive effects of many types of physical activity. It is so that the musculoskeletal and metabolic effects are quite similar with tennis and football, whereas the cardiovascular effects are somewhat lower because of a lower heart rate during tennis compared to football. But it's fantastic for us as exercise physiologists, and we are, as described at the Copenhagen Center for Team Sport and Health, investigating many different types of sports, and we are using this as a broad spectrum prevention and treatment of lifestyle diseases. But it is indeed so that football has a tremendous broad spectrum effect as it covers all the three main areas of fitness.
Okay.
More questions?
This is Dr. Lee Sung-ju from Korea. Thank you for your great presentation, and congratulations for your impressive and successful result of your research, especially for hypertension and diabetes mellitus. One thing that I'm trying to ask is that they didn't have any mention about their joint pain. I mean, more than 45 years old, they are suffering a lot of joint pain. For this, especially for football, how about joint pain? They didn't mention about that.
No, we didn't have any particular measure. They went through a health consultation before they entered the study. and they were not complaining about locomotory limitations as such, so we don't really know. And all of the studies we have been doing are from selected group. Next step is actually how to implement that, taking into account those various aspects, as you mentioned that. Training twice a week will also allow you to recover from one training session to the other, because you're definitely sore after your first session, but you can recover to the next session. And as you enjoy to get to the next session, you realize you can do it, which is often not the case when you're running and say, do I really have to run next time? Because I'm quite sore from the first session. So they surpass that problem in the initial phase as such, but no specific evaluation of joint pains or other areas of the body where they could have problems.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is one more question. Yeah.
Can I just add briefly that in one study conducted at a Norwegian hospital with the female hospital workers, we did actually focus on the joint and muscular pain. And apart from the data that I briefly showed there, with a lowering of the intensity of pain in the neck and shoulders, and also a lowering of the pain duration, we observed no changes in all the other joints and all the other muscles. So it looks as if this type of training, conducted on small pitches, 5 versus 5, conducted with training rather than games, with much less injury, much less strain, is actually providing no significant increase in the joint pain, and actually for the neck and shoulder, actually a decrease.
Thank you, Peter and Jen, for a very nice presentation. I'm Dr. Sule from Kenya. Mine is more of a theoretical fear. At 70, CA prostate, one will be expecting the GFR to start falling, so there are risks of mineral bone disease in this cohort of patients. Did you look at the metabolic parameters, calcium, phosphate, uric acid, and so on, and do we need to take precautions if we venture? Because I'm itching to venture into this kind of practice, because we have quite a number of this cohort at home and they might benefit from this. But before I go ahead, what special precaution does one have to take in view of exacerbating mineral bone disease?
My first comment would be, please look at the alternatives. If we don't have any physical activity, what will be the alternative? WHO, the World Health Organization, have recently provided a strong statement in 2014 that physical inactivity is actually the most prominent cause of death and disease. So the alternative is terrible. And, but obviously, when we are talking about the prevention and treatment of lifestyle diseases and other diseases, we have to modify the type of physical activity, in this case, modify the football so it relates to the particular participant group. And yes, these elderly men are vulnerable to problems with their bones and also to bone fractures. And in one of the studies where they are recruited from the hospital, they do go through a bone scan, and if they have severe osteoporosis, they cannot enter the program. But in addition to that, we can also make rule changes. For example, you cannot touch on top of the ball when you are playing in this program as a prostate cancer patient to avoid falls. And you can also, as they are currently doing in England, in Canada, and in other countries, introduce walking football. Because walking football is not as good as normal football, but it's better than inactivity.
Good.
And it adds, because we have some excellent examples from this study. There's one guy traveling 6.5 hours to take part in the training, indicating there is something he goes for, and that's the relationship. And what they say is, I don't feel like a patient, I feel like a human being. So all those social, psychological aspects we haven't really touched much upon, but they may be the most important results from these studies.
Last question, last comment.
Yes. Okay. Hello. Okay. Bravo, James Peter.
I would like to know what the pedagogical approach was in order to receive funding. Was that private, public funding, or was FIFA the moneylender in this case, or the funding institution? And the various pathologies, and also in terms of the joints, what kind of, how were you able to realize and to implement all of these researches? I'm the team medical officer of the Mali Association.
The private industry, or was it the government, or was it FIFA? Because you have given a lot of studies, it must have costed a lot of money. So who paid for it?
There have been many contributors to the studies that we are conducting in Copenhagen and elsewhere. FIFA has sponsored about 1/10 of the finances related to the studies. The Danish government has been supporting us heavily, and also charities. And in addition, also the Danish Football Association and the Danish Sports Confederation, because the Danish Sports Confederation can see that football is a driving force, and hopefully many other team sports and other sports like tennis can actually gain from these results and provide implementation programs related to their own sports.
Okay. But it has been hard work get funding to these type of experiments. It's not like people standing there ready just to throw money into that, even though we will think they should, because there are great perspective into these. But recently, as Peter touched upon 2 years ago, we got a pretty nice funding from a private foundation, about 4 million euros, which then set the scene, and it's not just football, it's team sports. So that gave us a basis for the future study, having the opportunity to bring even more researchers together, not only from Copenhagen, but throughout the world. So if you want to contribute, just come. We are ready to receive you.
Well, thank you very much
Hello.
for this.
Jiri.
Yes.
Dr. Paisan from Thailand. May I have a last question?
Okay.
Not the question. May I propose for the communication message for the public? As we have exercise is medicine, why don't you use like a football is medicine?
The exercise football pill.
Maybe another word, football is medicine also.
Thank you, Paisal. We are again slightly behind the schedule. Thank you for the contribution. Now we will have a break till 16:15. Oh, that's your last slide, coming, the collaborators. Thank you. I think we have to applaud them. So we will have now break till 16:15, and then we will distribute into 3 groups for the practical session about the management of sudden cardiac arrest. One group is led by Professor Dagmar Keller. Maybe you can stand up. She's a cardiologist and emergency medicine in the University of Zurich. Then the second group is Andreas Juchli. Is he here? I think he's waiting outside. And the third group, Ephraim Kramer. We will be working practically. We don't want to cut down the practical session because we are behind the time, till 17:15. So we start at 17:15 sharp here again for the last session. So we go for coffee break. Thank you.